Hawaii Public Radio, member supported. All things considered. I'm Dave Lawrence. Legendary blues harmonica player Charlie Musselwhite coming back to the islands.
How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. How about you? Thanks for asking.
I'm rocking.
I know that. Between Dad on guitar and harmonica, Mom on piano, you had music around you from the very beginning.
Well, there was a lot of people in my family that played music. None of them really played professionally, rather played piano in church. And my father played just around when he was a kid growing up in Mississippi. I mean, almost every Musselwhite I've ever met played an instrument, but not necessarily professionally. In fact, my father really discouraged me from playing.
Wow.
He just thought it was something frivolous, and you should go to school and get a good job and settle down. Don't waste your time playing music. I didn't get any kind of inspiration from family members, and I liked all kinds of music, but when I was about 13, I had become really interested in blues, and I was going all over Memphis looking for old blues records. I really loved the sound of the blues harmonica, and one time I got to thinking, well, you got a harmonica. It feels so good to listen to it. I bet it feels even better to play it. So I just went out in the woods and started teaching myself how to play the blues on the harmonica. Later on, I got to know some real old-timers around Memphis that played guitar and harmonica, and I started hanging out with them and learning from them. And if I had known at the time that I was going to have a career in music, I would have paid a lot more attention. But I just thought I was having fun. I just loved the music, and I just wanted to play it, but I didn't know I was going to spend my life actually doing it and traveling the world.
The chances that you had to sort of mentor with people like that, you wish you had done a little bit more learning?
Yeah, if I could go back, I'd like to know a lot more about their whole lives, who they learned from. As a teenager, I just didn't think to ask all those questions that
you come up with later. I know what you're saying. You headed up Highway 51, though.
Well, the only reason I went to Chicago was I'd heard there was good factory jobs up there that paid good money. And I didn't know about the blues scene up there. I didn't have any reason to think that I was going to run into Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf and Little Walter and Sonny Boy Williamson in Chicago, but I sure did. Right away, I discovered the whole blues scene there and just started hanging out in all the blues clubs. And coming from Memphis, I already knew how to drink, so I was good at hanging out. All these guys just thought of me as a fan because I'd request tunes and stuff, and they were surprised and flattered that I would come to see them in these really rough places. And when it came out that I played, people would insist that I sit in. And then other guys started offering me gigs, and that got my attention. You're going to pay me? Okay, let's go.
Tell me a story when one of those first big names said, you got to sit in with me.
Muddy Waters, there was a club called Pepper's Lounge on 43rd Street, and Muddy lived right around the corner. And when he wasn't on the road, that was his home club. Pepper's was open till 4 in the morning, so that's a lot of time to play. All these different musicians that didn't have a gig that night, they'd be hanging out and sitting in with Muddy. So it wasn't unusual for me to sit in. It's just unusual that I was as young as I was. I was a teenager, and probably the youngest guys around there were probably in their late 30s or mid-40s or something. It was a strictly adult crowd, and there was nobody my age or white. So that was unusual, a young white kid sitting in. So Muddy and Wolf and all those guys, when they found out I played, they were really tickled to hear me play and real flattered that I would be hanging out with them, and they were real encouraging to me to play, and that gave me a lot of confidence in myself. And first thing I know, I've been offered a chance to record an album, and that put me on the road.
Another influence, Big Joe Williams.
We roomed together a couple of places, and Big Joe played a 9-string guitar, and he wrote Baby Please Don't Go. He knew guys like Robert Johnson and Charlie Patton. And when I'd walk into Pepper's Lounge with Big Joe, Muddy would get all like a little kid, because Joe had been a hero of his. And he'd get us a table and a setup and buy us some drinks and tell the audience that Big Joe Williams was in the house, the man that wrote Baby Please Don't Go.
You paint such a cool picture right there. John Lee Hooker, described as having been a close friend of yours.
John lived in Detroit, but he would come to Chicago. I'd always been a fan of his. I had his records under all different kind of pseudonyms. He recorded as Texas Slim and John Lee Booker and Johnny Williams and all these different names, but I could tell it was him. Nobody sounded like John Lee but John Lee.
Right on.
He came to Chicago one time to play. I went over there to see him. We just hit it off immediately, became good friends and stayed in touch till the day he died. And spoke at his funeral. I played with him and recorded with him. He was my best man when I got married to Henrietta.
That's a lot of connections. It says on Wikipedia page related to you that you're the one who convinced John Lee to move to California.
I don't know if it's a fact, but I know that I went out to California first, and I remember calling him and telling him how great it was and how he was really going to like it. And wasn't long after that, I found out he had moved into an apartment in Oakland, and I went right over to visit him.
When you think about your own move to San Francisco, some of your memories from that.
Well, first of all, it was the underground radio in San Francisco that was responsible for me leaving Chicago, because those guys somehow got a hold of my record and knew about me and started playing me, and that created a buzz. Next thing I know, people are calling me to come play in California, and finally offered me a whole month of work, and I thought, well, I'll just go out and do that and come back to Chicago. But when I got to California, it's like blues was something exotic. They weren't familiar with Chicago blues, and they wanted to hear it, and so I was glad to play it for them. I found out the whole West Coast had lots of work, these big ballrooms and all the hippies, and man, it was just a wild scene. I loved it. That kept me on the West Coast.
There's some classic venues that are probably part of this journey that you're describing. I'm thinking the Fillmore.
Well, my very first gig in San Francisco was at the Fillmore. The bill was me and Cream and Butterfield, and that's where I got to know Eric Clapton. Just playing at the Fillmore was a pretty big deal. You didn't play one night. You played, like, I think 4 or 5 nights in a row. Bill Graham was real good at bringing in people that people might not have ever heard of, but they trusted his taste. And whoever he booked, people would flock to the Fillmore. They couldn't wait to hear the next group that he was going to introduce to you. The lineups could be wild, too. He might have Count Basie and Ravi Shankar and Albert King on the same bill, and it would work.
That's the essence of rock. It's kind of like this radio job, because one week we could be interviewing some new heavy metal band, and the next week talking to a guy like you. And to me, that is the same kind of spirit that Bill Graham brought to those concerts.
Yeah, it all dovetails together. It doesn't have to be kept separate.
That's right.
It's like I've recorded with Brazilian groups and Cuban groups in their style of music, and jazz groups and gospel, whatever. I love to see how I can fit what I do with whoever I'm playing with.
Whether it's Bonnie Raitt, Tom Waits, In Excess, to add to what you're talking about, Cyndi Lauper, yeah. Ben Harper, a lot of people. Continental Drifter recording from '99. Did you actually go to Cuba to do that one? Or
no, at that time you couldn't go to Cuba legally, but the Cuban group called Quarteto Patria, he is booked into a festival in Norway, and I was playing there. I knew I was going to see them there, and I already was a big fan of Eliados Ochoa. I had all his CDs, and I knew somebody that could get them out of Cuba. So I knew all his music, and my first idea was that maybe we could record some blues together. But when I started talking to them about blues, they didn't know anything about it. They'd never heard any blues. They'd never heard of B.B. King or Muddy Waters or anybody. So I said, that's okay. I know your music. I'll play with you guys. So what I did was I put blues lyrics to their tunes, and it worked out.
That's the way to do it, and you have that great collaborative spirit. When you look at a life like yours, Charlie, as we go to wrap it up, looking forward and maybe think about things that are left undone, what comes to mind?
Oh, boy. Well, kind of like what I said earlier, I wish I'd paid more attention. I wish I could go back in time and revisit all the people I knew and ask them more questions about their own lives.
Like who?
Oh, Will Shade, Furry Lewis, Gus Cannon, and then later on, Big Joe Williams and Little Walter, Sonny Boy Williamson. I knew them real well. I mean, we were friends, but I never thought I was just too young to think of it on that level of delving into their lives and how they thought about things, and we were just having too much fun.
I could go all day. I hope this wasn't a drag or a hassle.
Oh, not at all, and I enjoyed it.
He's tonight at the Kauai Beach Resort, tomorrow at the Honoka'a People's Theater. You be safe, Charlie. Charlie Musselwhite, and a pleasure having you on All Things Considered with me today. I'm very grateful.
My pleasure. I look forward to seeing you. Hey, aloha. This is Charlie Musselwhite, and you're tuned to my good friend, Dave Lawrence. I ain't lying.